Hello and welcome back to another evening together. Tonight we're settling in for a long one. We're going to walk through the entire story of Rick Grimes, from the very beginning all the way to the very end. And I mean the whole thing. The Walking Dead, every season, plus the ones who live. His complete journey. There's a lot to talk about, so we're going to take our time with it. No rushing, no skipping ahead. We're doing the whole thing, start to finish. If you're here to fall asleep to, that's perfect. I'll be here the whole time. And if you just want something to listen to while you're winding down for the night, that works too. Either way, get comfortable. Grab a blanket if you need one, and we'll begin. So before we get into the apocalypse and the walkers and all of that, I think it's worth spending a little time on who Rick Grimes actually was before the world fell apart. Because I think people forget, or maybe they just skip past it, that Rick was a pretty ordinary guy. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't some survivalist living off the grid. He was a sheriff's deputy in a small town in Georgia called King County. Drove a cruiser, ate fast food on his lunch break, went home to his wife and kid at the end of the day. That was his life. His wife was Lori. They'd been together for a long time, since before Carl was born, and Carl was already around 7 or 8 years old by the time the show starts. So we're talking about a marriage that had some years on it. And like a lot of marriages that have some years on them, it wasn't in the best shape. Rick confides in his best friend and partner, Shane Walsh, while they're eating burgers in the cruiser one afternoon, that he and Lori have been fighting. She accused him that very morning, in front of Carl, of not caring about his family, which is a rough thing to hear from the person you love, especially in front of your kid. And what's interesting about this scene is that it's the most normal, mundane thing in the world. Two cops eating lunch, talking about relationship problems. It could be any Tuesday. It could be any two guys anywhere in America. And that's kind of the point. Rick's life was regular, ordinary in the way that most lives are ordinary. He had problems, sure, but they were the kind of problems you work through or you don't. They weren't the kind of problems that end the world. That same afternoon, a call comes in over the radio. High-speed pursuit, 2 armed suspects. Rick and Shane dump their food and race to the scene with a couple of other officers, Leon Bassett and Lambert Kendall. They set up a spike strip on the road and wait. The car comes flying in, hits the strip, shreds its tyres, and flips off the road, rolling several times before coming to a stop upside down in a field. Rick approaches the wreck carefully. A man crawls out and starts shooting immediately. Rick takes a round to the chest, but he's wearing a vest, so he goes down hard, but he's okay. Shane drops the first gunman. A second one comes out with a shotgun and gets taken down too. Rick's on the ground, winded but alive. He tells Shane not to tell Lori about what happened, because even in the middle of almost dying, he's thinking about not worrying his wife. But there was a third man in that car. Nobody saw him. He crawled out through the grass while everyone was focused on the other two, and he came around the side and shot Rick. Not in the vest this time. Rick goes down for real. He's rushed to the hospital and he falls into a coma. And that's it. That's the last normal day of Rick Grimes' life. The burger with Shane. The argument with Lori that morning. The routine call that went wrong. He closes his eyes in one world, and when he opens them again, everything, and I mean everything, will be different. I always think about what that must have been like for Lori and Carl, finding out Rick had been shot. Shane drives to the school to tell her. She sees his face and immediately asks, "Is he alive?" Because she knows. She can tell from the way Shane is walking toward her that something terrible has happened. And the thing is, while Rick is lying in that hospital bed, the world outside keeps turning, and then it stops turning altogether. The outbreak begins. The dead start coming back. Society collapses. And Rick sleeps through all of it. Shane tried to get him out. He really did. There's a flashback that shows Shane at the hospital during the military evacuation. Soldiers are sweeping the halls, executing infected patients. Shane is trying to move Rick, but there are too many tubes and wires. The power goes out. Shane puts his ear to Rick's chest and hears nothing. He thinks Rick is dead. so he barricades the door with a hospital gurney to keep the walkers out. And he leaves. He takes Laurie and Carl and he runs. And honestly, it's hard to blame him. He thought his best friend was gone. But Rick wasn't gone. He wakes up alone in Harrison Memorial Hospital. And this, I think, is one of the most iconic openings in television history. It's right up there with the very best cold opens ever produced. The room is silent. The flowers on the bedside table are dead and brown, dried up weeks ago. The IV bags are empty. There's nobody. No nurses, no doctors, no sounds of a working hospital. Just silence and stillness and a fluorescent light flickering overhead. He's weak, dehydrated, confused. He stumbles out of the room, and the hallway is dark, trashed, stained with old blood. He finds a set of double doors chained shut. Somebody has scrawled the words, "Don't open, dead inside," across them in black paint. And through the gap between the doors, grey fingers are reaching, grasping. He can hear groaning on the other side. Rick doesn't understand what he's seeing. He backs away and finds a stairwell that smells like death. He lights matches to see. He pushes through a heavy door and comes out the back of the hospital into a loading bay. And when his eyes adjust to the sunlight, he sees hundreds of bodies wrapped in white sheets, arranged in rows, stacked on top of each other. Flies everywhere, military equipment abandoned. Helicopters on the ground, sandbags, but no people, nobody alive. He wanders out of the hospital grounds in his hospital gown. He finds a bicycle in a park, and right there, next to the bike, is the upper half of a woman, close while conscious. He falls off the close while conscious. He falls off the bike, scrambles back up, and rides away. I think the reason the opening hits so hard, even re-watching it now, is because of how quiet it is. There's no exposition dump. Nobody explains what happened. Rick just wakes up and the world is wrong, and he has to figure it out the same way we do, by looking around and putting the pieces together. It's lonely in a way that gets under your skin. He rides the bike back to his neighbourhood. His house is empty. The front door is open. He goes inside and calls for Laurie and Carl. Nothing. He sits on the floor and sobs. He genuinely doesn't know if he's awake or dreaming. He goes back outside and sits on the front steps, and that's when a man is stumbling down the road toward him. Rick waves, trying to get his attention, but while he's distracted, a boy creeps up behind him and hits him in the head with a shovel. That boy is Dwayne Jones. His father is Morgan Jones, and Morgan is the first living person Rick meets in the new world. Morgan shoots the stumbling man in the head, then turns the gun on Rick and demands to know if he's been bitten. Rick passes out before he can answer. He wakes up tied to a bed. Dwayne is standing guard with a baseball bat. Morgan eventually unties him after determining Rick isn't infected. They're in a neighbour's house, the Drake family home, which Rick recognises. And over dinner, Morgan explains everything. The dead come back. Bites kill you, but not right away. First there's a fever, then you die, then you reanimate. Society is gone. The military tried to contain it and failed. There's nothing left. Morgan has his own tragedy. His wife Jenny turned. She wanders their old street at night. Morgan can see her through the upstairs window, walking past the house, sometimes trying the door handle. He takes a rifle and sets up in the bedroom, looking through the scope, trying to put her down. But he can't. He lines up the shot and his hand starts shaking and he lowers the gun, crying. He just can't do it. And I think that scene tells you everything about Morgan Jones as a character. He knows what needs to be done. He understands it intellectually, but his heart won't let him. And that tension between knowing and doing will define Morgan for the rest of his time on the show. Rick goes back to the King County Sheriff's Department. He showers. He gathers weapons, rifles, shotguns, ammunition. He gives Morgan a walkie-talkie and tells him to turn it on every day at dawn. Rick will try to contact him. Before he leaves, Rick goes back to the park and finds the legless woman from earlier, the one who reached for him by the bicycle. He crouches down and says, "I'm sorry this happened to you." Then he shoots her. It's a mercy kill, but it's also Rick acknowledging something about this new world. These things used to be people. They had lives, and they deserve at least that much. Rick gives Morgan a bag of guns and tells him to be careful. Morgan gives Rick directions to Atlanta, where the CDC is, and where the government was supposedly setting up a refugee camp. Rick loads up a police cruiser and heads south. Along the way, he tries the radio. Nothing. He drives through empty towns and past abandoned vehicles, and the silence is oppressive. This is a man who's been awake in the new world for maybe 2 days, and he's already completely alone again. He stops at a farmhouse looking for gas and finds a man and woman sitting together in a room. They've killed themselves. A gun on the floor between them. They chose to go out together rather than face whatever was happening outside. Rick pauses and looks at them, and you can see him processing what kind of world does this to people. He finds a horse at the farm, a big brown horse, and decides to ride it into Atlanta. If you've ever seen the image of Rick on horseback riding into a deserted city with skyscrapers towering overhead, that's this moment. It's one of the most iconic shots in the show. Just a man on a horse in the middle of the end of the world, looking for anyone who might still be alive. Atlanta is not what he expected. The streets are empty at first, but then he rounds a corner, and there they are. Hundreds of walkers, maybe thousands, filling the street from sidewalk to sidewalk. The horse panics. Walkers swarm them. The horse goes down screaming, and Rick crawls under an abandoned tank. Surrounded on all sides, he pulls his revolver and puts it under his chin. He's about to pull the trigger. This is maybe 30 seconds from being the end of Rick Grimes' story. And then a voice crackles through the tank's radio. "Hey you, dumbass!" Rick freezes. "Yeah, you in the tank. Cozy in there?" That voice belongs to Glenn Rhee, a young guy, early 20s, fast on his feet, and way too brave for his own good. Glenn talks Rick through an escape route over the tank radio, telling him exactly when to move, which direction to run, and where to find him. Rick climbs out of the tank hatch, grabs a grenade he spots inside, and sprints through the walkers, following Glenn's directions. They end up in an alley, and Glenn leads him into a department store, where a small group of survivors has been doing supply runs into the city. That group includes Andrea, who is fiercely protective of her younger sister Amy back at camp. There's T-Dog, who is steady and dependable. Jacqui, who is quiet but pragmatic. Morales, who has a wife and 2 kids waiting at their camp outside the city. And then there's Merle Dixon. Merle is a problem from minute one. He's loud, aggressive, racist, high on drugs he found somewhere in the store, and he is picking fights with everyone. When he starts beating T-Dog and hurling slurs, Rick steps in and handcuffs Merle to a pipe on the roof. It's the first real leadership decision Rick makes in the new world, and it's not a popular one. Merle's brother Daryl is back at the camp, and he's not going to be happy about this. But Rick isn't doing it to be cruel. He's doing it because someone has to, and nobody else will. The group needs to get out of the city. The walkers are pressing against the glass doors of the department store, and it's only a matter of time before they break through. Rick comes up with a plan that is both brilliant and disgusting. They kill a walker, hack it open, and smear the guts all over themselves. The idea is that if they smell like the dead won't notice them. And it works mostly. They walk through the herd pretending to be walkers, shuffling along, not making eye contact, trying not to breathe through their noses. It almost falls apart when it starts raining and the smell starts washing off, but they make it to a truck and a car and escape the city. T-Dog was supposed to go back and free Merle before they left, but he dropped the key down a drain. He chained the roof access door to buy Merle time, but Merle is still handcuffed up there, alone, with walkers banging on the other side of the door. That decision, or accident really, will have consequences that ripple through the entire series. Because Merle Dixon doesn't die on that roof. He saws off his own hand with a hacksaw and disappears. They drive back to the survivor camp on the outskirts of Atlanta, up in the hills by a quarry. And that's where Rick's world realigns, because standing at that camp, alive and healthy, are Laurie and Carl and Shane. Rick runs to his family. He grabs Carl and holds him so tight the kid can barely breathe. He wraps his arms around Laurie. He's crying. They're crying. Everyone is watching. And just off to the side, Shane is standing there, watching too, and the expression on his face is not what you'd expect from a best friend witnessing a miracle. Because during the time Rick was gone, Shane and Laurie started sleeping together. Shane had stepped into Rick's role, not just as the group's protector, but as Laurie's partner and Carl's father figure. And now the real thing is back. I've always found this to be one of the most interesting dynamics in the whole show. Shane wasn't a villain for what he did. He thought Rick was dead. He and Laurie found comfort in each other during the worst thing that had ever happened to either of them. But Rick's return changed the equation entirely. Suddenly Shane is the odd man out. Suddenly everything he built in Rick's absence is someone else's. And that resentment, that jealousy, that feeling of being pushed aside, it's going to eat him alive over the next season and a half. The camp is attacked by walkers one night. It's a swarm that comes out of the tree line with no warning. Several people die, including Amy, Andrea's younger sister, who is bitten while the group is having dinner. Andrea holds Amy's body through the night, refusing to let anyone near, refusing to leave, just sitting there cradling her dead sister and waiting. When Amy reanimates the next morning, Andrea looks her in the eyes, whispers something, and then shoots her. It's the first time Andrea has to do something like that, and it nearly destroys her. She'll carry that weight for the rest of her time on the show. Ed Pelletier, Carol's abusive husband, is also killed during the attack. Carol stands over his body the next day and picks up a pickaxe and drives it into his skull to prevent reanimation. She does it more than once. There's anger in those swings that has nothing to do with walkers and everything to do with years of cruelty she endured from that man. It's a small moment, easy to miss, but it's the first glimpse of who Carol Pelletier is going to become. The group decides to move. Rick suggests the CDC in Atlanta, hoping there might be scientists working on a cure, or at least some answers. Shane wants to go to Fort Benning, a military base further south. The group votes, and they go with Rick. Shane is furious. He's been leading this group while Rick was in a coma, and now Rick shows up, and everyone follows him instead. That resentment is toxic, and it's growing every day. They lose Jim along the way. He was bitten during the camp attack, and the infection is spreading. The fever is cooking him alive. He's delirious, talking about dreams he had, about digging graves before the attack, dreams that turned out to be premonitions. He asks to be left by the side of the road under a tree, and the group respects his wishes. One by one they say their goodbyes. Jackie gives him a kiss on the cheek, and they drive on, leaving Jim propped against a tree, alone, waiting to die and come back as something else. The CDC is mostly abandoned. One scientist remains, Dr. Edwin Jenner. He's been alone for months, talking to a computer system named Vi, slowly losing his mind. He lets the group in, takes blood samples, and for one night they have something they haven't had since the world ended. Normalcy, hot showers, real food, wine. Glenn gets drunk and Daryl encourages it. Carl tries wine and hates it. Everyone laughs. It's a beautiful little scene because you know it can't last. The next morning, Jenner shows them brain scans of a test subject he calls TS-19. The scans show the infection, killing the brain, then restarting just the brainstem. The person is gone. What comes back is something else entirely. Jenner reveals that TS-19 was his wife. She made him promise to keep working. He's been down here alone, trying, and now the fuel is running out. When the generators die, the building's safety protocols will kick in. It contains deadly pathogens, weaponized smallpox, dangerous biological material. The safety measure is called an HIT, a high-impulse thermobaric explosion that will incinerate everything. And Jenner has locked them inside. The group panics. Shane grabs a gun. Daryl grabs an axe. They're trying to break through doors that were built to withstand a rocket launcher. Rick talks Jenna down. He tells him that they want the chance to keep going, even if it's hard, even if there's no cure, even if there's no hope. They want to try. Jenna opens the doors, but before Rick leaves, Jenna grabs his hand and pulls him close and whispers something in his ear. We don't find out what he said until much later, but I'll tell you now because it matters. Jenna told Rick that everyone is already infected. You don't need to be bitten to turn. When you die, no matter how you die, you come back. Rick carries that secret for a long time. Carol pulls a hand grenade out of her bag, one she found in Rick's pants when she was doing laundry, and Rick uses it to blast out a window. They escape just before the building detonates. Jacqui stays behind with Jenna. They hold hands and watch the group flee on the security monitor as the building erupts in a column of fire. And just like that, the last institution, the last building with the lights on, the last place that might have had answers, is a smoking crater behind them. They're on their own. The group heads south on the highway. They're aiming vaguely toward Fort Benning, but nobody really believes they'll make it. The RV breaks down, again, because Dale's radiator hose is held together with tape and prayers. While they're stopped among a massive pile-up of abandoned cars, a herd of walkers comes through. Everyone hides under vehicles. Sophia, Carol's 12-year-old daughter, panics and runs into the woods. 2 walkers chase her. Rick goes after them, catches up, kills both walkers, and tells Sophia to hide by a creek while he leads more walkers away. When he comes back, she's gone. The search for Sophia takes up a huge chunk of the second season, and I know some people found it slow at the time, but I think it works better now than it did when it aired. Because the search isn't really about Sophia. It's about what kind of group these people are. It's about whether they'll spend time and risk their lives for one missing girl when the smart move might be to cut their losses and keep moving. And Rick insists they keep looking. He refuses to give up on her. They end up at a farm owned by a veterinarian named Herschel Green, because Carl gets shot. He's in the woods with Rick and Shane, and they come across a beautiful deer standing in a clearing. Carl is mesmerized. He steps closer, smiling, reaching out. And then a gunshot rings out. A man named Otis, one of Herschel's people, was hunting the deer, and the bullet passed through the animal and hit Carl in the abdomen. Herschel operates on Carl using his veterinary skills. He's a good man, Herschel. Deeply religious, fiercely protective of his family, and principled in a way that feels almost old-fashioned even before the apocalypse. He lets Rick's group stay on his land while Carl recovers, but he makes it clear that this is temporary. His farm, his rules. The search for Sophia consumes the group. Day after day they go into the woods, spreading out, covering ground, calling her name. Rick nearly dies fighting a walker in a ravine while looking for her. Daryl takes a crossbow bolt to the side and hallucinates a conversation with Merle while lying at the bottom of a creek bed. Andrea accidentally shoots Daryl when he stumbles out of the tree line, looking like a walker, caked in mud and blood. It's a dark comedy of errors, except nobody's laughing. Shane is getting worse. The Otis incident changed him. He looks at Rick and sees a man who would have died at that FEMA shelter because he would have tried to save both himself and Otis. Shane sees that kind of thinking as weakness. In Shane's worldview, the old rules are dead. Morality is a luxury they can't afford. What matters is survival, and anyone who prioritizes anything else is putting the group at risk. He's also struggling with Laurie. She told him it was over when Rick came back, but she's pregnant now, and she doesn't know whose child it is, and that uncertainty is eating both of them alive. Laurie asks Glenn to get her morning after pills from a pharmacy. She takes them, then throws them up. She can't go through with it. When Rick finds the empty package, Laurie admits the pregnancy and admits that she and Shane were together. Rick already suspected. He tells her he understands, but the look on his face says otherwise. Meanwhile, Glenn discovers that Herschel has been keeping walkers in his barn. His wife, his stepson, his neighbours, people from the community who turned during the early days. Herschel believes they're sick, not dead. He's a man of faith and science, and he cannot accept that the people he loved are truly gone. It creates a schism. Dale, the group's, it creates a schism. Dale, the group's moral conscience, argues that it's Herschel's land and Herschel's barn, and they should respect his wishes. Shane doesn't care about anyone's wishes. He walks down to the barn with a bag of guns and starts handing them out. Glenn takes one. Andrea takes one. T-Dog takes one. Herschel is outside trying to wrangle two walkers from the swamp on catch poles, leading them toward the barn like animals, and Shane intercepts him. Shane shoots the walker Herschel is holding. Could a living, breathing person walk away from this? Shane screams, pumping rounds into the walker. The walker keeps coming. Shane puts one in its head. It drops. Then Shane breaks the barn locks. He throws the doors open, and one by one, the walkers stumble out into the daylight. The group opens fire. It's loud and it's ugly, and Herschel falls to his knees in the grass, watching his wife, his friends, his neighbours get shot down. Beth screams and tries to run to one of them. Maggie holds her back, and then the barn goes quiet. The gunfire stops. Everyone is breathing hard and the ground is littered with bodies. And then one more walker comes shuffling out of the dark interior. It's Sophia. She's been in there the whole time. While the group was searching the woods, putting up flyers, risking their lives every day, Sophia was 50 yards away, behind a wooden door. Herschel's people must have found her in the woods after she ran, already bitten, already turning, and they put her in the barn with the others. Nobody told Rick's group because Herschel was protecting his secret. Nobody moves. Nobody can. Carol lets out a sound that isn't quite a scream and isn't quite a sob, and Daryl grabs her, holds her back, because she's trying to get to her daughter. Sophia shuffles forward, small and grey, her clothes dirty, her eyes blank. She was 12 years old. Rick walks forward alone. He raises his gun, and he's the one who puts Sophia down, because that's what Rick does. When nobody else can pull the trigger, Rick does it. He carries that weight so others don't have to, and every time he does it, he loses a little piece of the man he used to be. Shane gets worse after that. He lures Rick out into a field one night, under the pretense of looking for an escaped prisoner. He pulls a knife. He tells Rick that Laurie and Carl are his now, that Rick can't keep them safe. They circle each other in the dark, and Rick says, "You're going to have to kill an unarmed man." Shane hesitates, and in that hesitation, Rick drives a knife into Shane's chest. Shane falls. Rick holds him. He's crying. He's just killed his best friend, the man who ate burgers with him in the cruiser, the man who tried to save him at the hospital, the man who protected his family when he couldn't. And it doesn't matter that Shane was about to kill him. It doesn't make it easier. Carl appears from the tree line. He sees his father standing over Shane's body, and then Shane's eyes open. Not Shane anymore. A walker wearing Shane's face. Carl raises his gun and shoots. He puts down what's left of his father's best friend. He's maybe 10 years old. That night, a massive herd descends on Herschel's farm. The fences go down. The barn catches fire. Jimmy is killed. Patricia is killed. Andrea is separated from the group and left behind. The rest scatter and eventually reunite on the highway. And Rick finally tells them what Jenna whispered at the CDC. We're all infected. Whatever it is, we all carry it. The group is furious. They feel betrayed. How long has he known? Why didn't he tell them? And Rick, exhausted, grieving, covered in his best friend's blood, snaps. He tells them he killed Shane. He tells them he did it to protect them. And then he says something that defines the next year of his leadership. He looks around at these people and he says if they want to stay, they stay. But this isn't a democracy anymore. The farm is gone. The road stretches ahead of them into the dark, and Rick Grimes, who was a small-town cop eating a hamburger not so long ago, is now something else entirely. He's a killer, a leader, a man carrying secrets that would break the people around him if they knew. And he's the only thing standing between his family and a world that wants them dead. So, with the farm behind them and nowhere in particular to go, the group spends months on the road. They move from house to house, clearing walkers, scavenging for food, barely sleeping. Laurie is visibly pregnant now and getting further along every day. The group is lean, hardened, and running on fumes. They've become efficient at killing. Carl carries a gun and knows how to use it. Carol is tougher. Even Beth, Herschel's youngest daughter, has adapted. They find the West Georgia Correctional Facility, a prison, fences, walls, guard towers, cell blocks. It's ugly, and it smells and it's full of walkers, but Rick sees something nobody else does. He sees a home. Rick takes charge of the clearing operation. He cuts an opening in the outer fence. Glenn and Daryl tie it shut behind them. Rick sprints across the yard alone to close a gate on the far side, while the others distract the walkers from the guard towers and the fence line. Then the group moves inside, clearing the dark corridors of the cell blocks room by room. Walkers in riot gear are a problem at first until Maggie figures out how you can stab them under the helmet. They claim Cell Block C. For the first time in months, everyone has a bed. An actual bed. That night, Herschel asks Beth and Maggie to sing, and they do. An old Irish song, and the group sits around eating whatever they've managed to find, and listening. Daryl keeps watch at the gate. Carol joins him and jokes about her shoulder hurting from the recoil of a rifle. He gives her a little massage, and she flirts with him in that awkward, sweet way they have. It's one of those rare, gentle moments the show gives you before it takes everything away. Rick starts talking about making the prison permanent. He wants to grow food, set up a community, build something real. He even steps back from leadership for a while, forming a council with Herschel, Daryl, Glenn, and others to share the burden of making decisions. He starts a garden. He puts down his gun and picks up a shovel. He's trying, really trying, to be something other than the man who killed his best friend in a field. But the universe, or at least this particular universe, doesn't let Rick Grimes be at peace for very long. Laurie goes into labour during a walker breach. The prisoners, a group of convicts who survived inside the prison when the world fell, were supposed to stay in their own cell block. But one of them, a man named Andrew, deliberately lures walkers inside to try and take over. The alarm system goes off, the corridors flood with walkers, and the group is scattered. Laurie, Carl, and Maggie end up trapped in the boiler room. The baby is coming, and something is wrong. Laurie knows she needs a cesarean section to survive, and she knows that without a real surgeon, without anesthesia, without anything, she's not going to make it. She tells Maggie to cut her open and save the baby. Carl is standing right there. Laurie looks at her son and tells him to be strong, to take care of his sister, to do what's right. It's so easy to do the wrong thing in this world, she tells him. If it feels wrong, don't do it. If it feels easy, don't do it. Maggie performs the C-section with a knife. The baby is delivered alive. Laurie bleeds out. And because everyone is already infected, because of what Jenna told Rick at the CDC, Carl knows what has to happen next. His mother will come back. She'll reanimate. So Carl, who is maybe 11 years old, raises his gun and shoots his mother in the head. When Rick finds out, when Maggie walks out of the boiler room carrying a newborn baby, and Carl walks out behind her with that hollow look in his eyes, Rick's face goes through about 6 different kinds of grief in the span of 10 seconds. He collapses. He's on his hands and knees on the concrete, sobbing, gasping. He can't speak. He can't stand. The man who held this group together through everything just falls apart completely. And what follows is, I think, some of the most heartbreaking stuff in the entire series. Rick starts hallucinating. He sees Laurie standing on the catwalks of the prison, watching him. He gets phone calls in an empty room. He picks up the receiver, and dead people are on the other end. Amy, Jim, Jackie, people he's lost. And finally, Laurie herself. He stands there holding the phone, tears streaming down his face, telling her he's sorry, telling her he loves her, talking to a dial tone and a ghost. The baby is named Judith, and Rick can barely look at her. Not because he doesn't love her, but because looking at her means accepting that Laurie is gone, and he's not ready to accept that. Meanwhile, a new threat has been building. A man who calls himself the governor runs a walled settlement called Woodbury. From the outside, it looks like paradise. There are families, streets, a doctor, regular meals. But behind the charm, the governor is something twisted. He keeps aquariums full of live walker heads in a private room in his apartment. Crashes nearby. He finds the soldiers. Crashes nearby. He finds the soldiers, earns their trust, then slaughters every single one of them and takes their weapons, vehicles, and supplies. He goes back to Woodbury and tells the townspeople the soldiers were already dead when he found them. Michonne and Andrea ended up in Woodbury after the farm fell. Michonne is suspicious from the start. She inspects the military trucks and finds bullet holes and blood that don't match the governor's story. The governor smiles and deflects. Michonne wants to leave. Andrea wants to stay. The conflict between the prison and Woodbury escalates when Merle, who survived the rooftop in Atlanta by sawing off his own hand, kidnaps Glenn and Maggie on a supply run. He brings them back to Woodbury. The governor interrogates them. He beats Glenn half to death, puts a walker in the room with him while he's duct taped to a chair. He forces Maggie to take off her shirt, implying a threat of sexual assault, though he doesn't follow through. Maggie breaks and tells him about the prison. Rick puts together a rescue team. They infiltrate Woodbury, fight their way through the streets, and extract Glenn and Maggie. During the chaos, Michonne sneaks into the governor's apartment and finds his room of horrors. She discovers Penny, realizes it's a Walker child, and drives her katana through Penny's head. The governor walks in and loses his mind. They fight. It's brutal and close quarters and ugly. Michonne grabs a shard of broken glass from one of the smashed aquariums and stabs the governor in the eye. The governor's assault on the prison comes in 2 waves, and both of them change everything. The first time, the governor rolls in with trucks and soldiers and grenades. He has Woodbury's people armed and ready. But Rick's group has a plan. They evacuate the cell block, letting the governor's forces breach the interior and then trigger the alarm system. Strobe lights flash. Sirens scream. The corridors fill with smoke from flash grenades that Glenn and Maggie set up at choke points. The governor's soldiers, most of whom are ordinary townspeople who have never been in real combat, panic. They stumble through dark corridors full of walkers and smoke and noise, and they break. They run. They pile into their vehicles and refuse to go back inside. The governor loses it. He stands in the middle of the road, watching his own people retreat, and something in him just snaps. He pulls out his sidearm and opens fire. On his own soldiers, he mows them down, men and women who trusted him, who followed him, who believed in his vision of Woodbury. He kills them because they failed him, and because in the governor's mind, failure and disloyalty are the same thing. Martinez and Schumpert, his 2 remaining lieutenants, watch from the truck in absolute horror. They don't run. They don't speak. They just stare. Karen, one of the Woodbury residents, survives only because she has the instinct to play dead, lying under a body while the governor walks down the line, finishing people off. After that massacre, the governor disappears. He wanders alone for a while, hollow and purposeless. And then, in one of the show's more unsettling narrative choices, we spend time with the governor as he finds a new family. An apartment building, 2 sisters, and a little girl. The girl, Megan, looks like his dead daughter, Penny. The governor reinvents himself as Brian Herriot, a name he finds on a barn wall. He earns their trust. He becomes a father figure to Megan. He falls in love with one of the sisters, Lily, and for a few episodes, you almost forget what he is. But he can't stay buried. He finds a new group of survivors at a campsite, charms his way into their leadership, and starts building again. He tells them about the prison. He tells them there are bad people there who will come for them. He's lying, of course. Rick's people are no threat to anyone. But the governor needs an enemy to unite people against. And he needs the prison because it represents the one thing he could never build on his own. Safety, community, purpose. The second assault is worse than the first. The governor has a tank, he has an army, and he has 2 hostages, Herschel and Michonne, captured during a supply run. Rick comes down to the fence to negotiate. He tries to offer a compromise genuinely. He tells the governor they can share the prison. There's room. They don't have to fight. He says, "We can all live together. We've all done the worst kind of things just to stay alive, but we can still come back. We're not too far gone." The governor isn't listening. He was never going to listen. He pulls Michonne's katana and holds it to Herschel's neck. Rick is pleading. He's looking at the man who saved Carl's life when he was shot, who taught him about patience and faith, who was the moral center of everything good about the prison community. And Rick is begging for his life. Herschel hears Rick's speech about coming back, about not being too far gone, and despite the blade against his throat, Herschel smiles, because Rick finally understands what Herschel was trying to teach him, that you can choose to be better, that the world doesn't have to make you into a monster. The governor swings the katana. He doesn't cut clean, he hacks. It takes multiple strikes, and Herschel falls, and the world goes red. The battle is chaos. The tank blows through the fences, walkers pour in through the gaps. The governor's people and Rick's people are shooting at each other across the yard. The prison yard becomes a killing field. Mika and Lizzie, 2 young girls the group had been caring for, grab baby Judith's car seat and run during the fighting, but after the battle, the car seat is found empty and bloody. Rick and Carl don't find Judith. They believe she's dead. That grief is another stone on the pile, another weight that Rick will carry until he learns the truth. Rick is beaten nearly unconscious by the governor himself, fist to fist, in the mud beside the burning prison. The governor gets on top of him and wraps his hands around Rick's throat and squeezes. Rick is fading. His vision is going dark. And then a blade erupts through the governor's chest. Michonne, freed somehow during the fighting, drove her katana through his back. The governor falls. Lily, his new partner, finds him lying in the dirt and shoots him in the head. The prison is destroyed. Everyone is scattered. The fences are down, the cell blocks are burning, and the home Rick built is gone. He staggers out with Carl, bloodied and broken, barely able to walk, and they disappear into the woods. Just the 2 of them, a father and his son, with nothing. Rick is in bad shape. He's concussed, maybe worse. Carl has to half carry him to a house where they barricade the doors, and Rick collapses on a couch. He doesn't move for almost a full day. Carl goes out alone to find food. He kills walkers by himself, and while Rick is lying there unconscious, Carl sits in a chair across the room and talks to him. Or really, talks at him. He says terrible things. He tells Rick that he couldn't protect anyone. He says he'd be fine if Rick died. He says Rick is nothing. And then Rick stirs. He makes a sound that sounds like a baby crying, and then Rick stirs. He makes a sound that might be Carl's name, and Carl breaks. All that anger just drains out of him, and he's a scared kid again, grabbing his father's hand, saying, "I'm scared." Because of course he is, he's a child. He's been pretending to be hard because the world demands it. But underneath all of that, he's just a boy who needs his dad to be okay. They eventually link up with Michonne, who track them by following their trail through the mud. And the 3 of them, Rick, Carl and Michonne, become a unit. A family really, though nobody calls it that yet. The road leads them through some dark places. They fall in with a group called the Claimers, led by a man named Joe. The Claimers are scavengers with a simple code. You claim what you want and it's yours. Daryl has been travelling with them, not by choice exactly, but because after the prison fell, he had nowhere else to go. The Claimers track Rick down on the road because Rick killed one of their men in a house a few days earlier. They corner Rick, Carl and Michonne at night. Joe holds a gun to Rick's head. One of the men pins Carl to the ground, and and starts to unzip his pants. And something in Rick Grimes just detonates. He throws his head back into Joe's face, and when Joe pulls him close, Rick bites into his neck. He tears out Joe's jugular with his teeth. Joe falls, gurgling, dying. The other claimers freeze. Michonne grabs a gun. Daryl starts swinging, and Rick, blood running down his chin, takes a knife and walks over to the man who is about to assault his son. The camera holds on Rick's face, and we hear the man screaming. And then we don't hear him anymore. The next morning, Rick is sitting against the side of a truck, covered in blood. He doesn't speak for a long time. Daryl sits next to him and tells him he didn't know who those people were. Rick just says, "It's not on you." And that's it. There they move on. But something fundamental has shifted. Rick has proven that there is no limit, no flaw, no line he won't cross if his son is in danger. And honestly, that's both the most admirable and the most terrifying thing about him. They reach a place called Terminus. There are signs all over the roads, hand-painted on plywood, tacked to trees. Sanctuary for all, community for all. Those who arrive survive. It sounds too good to be true, and it is. Terminus looks welcoming at first. A woman named Mary is grilling food in a courtyard. Friendly people wave them in. But Rick notices things. He spots Glenn's pocket watch on one of the Terminus residents. He sees riot gear from the prison, equipment that belonged to his people. He pulls his gun. A firefight breaks out. Rick, Carl, Michonne and Daryl are herded through the compound, past fences draped in what might be human remains, and into a train car. It's dark inside, and as Rick's eyes adjust, he sees Glenn. Maggie, Bob, Sasha, Abraham, Eugene, Rosita, Tara. They're all in there. The group asks Rick what they're going to do, and Rick, standing in the dark with blood still on his face, says, "They're going to feel pretty stupid when they find out." Someone asks, "Find out what?" And Rick says, "They're screwing with the wrong people." That's the end of Season 4, and it might be the most Rick Grimes line ever spoken. There's no panic in his voice, no desperation, just cold certainty. These people locked him in a box and he's already planning how to get out. It's also a callback to who Rick has become. The man who ate burgers in a cruiser 2 years ago would have been terrified. This Rick is something else. And here's what's interesting about that scene in the train car. Everyone is scared, but Rick makes them feel like they have a chance. That's his gift. Even in the worst possible situation, Rick Grimes makes you believe that there's a way forward. It doesn't mean he always has a plan. Sometimes he's faking it, but the belief he generates in the people around him is real. And it's the thing that keeps this group alive over and over again. Season 5 opens with the group at the trough, an actual metal trough, the kind you'd find in a slaughterhouse. Rick, Glenn, Daryl and Bob are kneeling in a line with their hands zip-tied behind their backs and gags in their mouths. Behind them, men in rubber aprons are working with assembly line efficiency. They hit each victim in the back of the head with an aluminum baseball bat to stun them, then draw a knife across the throat. The blood runs down the drain. Everything is practiced and mechanical. These people have done this hundreds of times. One of the first victims they kill at the trough is a guy named Sam, a young man Rick and Carol actually met on a supply run from the prison not long ago. Rick watches Sam die. He knows him, and Gareth, the leader of Terminus, strolls in with a clipboard asking about shot counts and procedures like a shift manager at a fast food restaurant. It's chilling because of how normalised it is. These people don't see themselves as monsters. They evolved, as Gareth puts it. They were good people once. They set up Terminus as a genuine sanctuary, put up signs, welcomed strangers, and then bad people came and destroyed that. They were locked in those same train cars, terrorised, brutalised, and when they finally fought back, they decided that the only way to survive was to become predators. That doesn't excuse anything, but it does add a layer to Terminus that makes it more than just a horror set piece. These are people who were broken by the world and rebuilt themselves into something terrible. And it makes you wonder, how far away are Rick's people from that? Not far, probably. The difference is they have each other. They have Rick. Glenn is next in line. The bat is raised, and then an explosion rocks the building. Carol, who has been tracking the group from outside, has covered herself in Walker guts, blended in with a herd, and fired a bottle rocket into a propane tank near the terminus fence. Walkers pour through the breach. In the confusion, the butchers stumble. Rick, who earlier carved a tiny wooden shiv from a piece of the train car and hid it in his sock, uses it to cut his zip ties. He stabs both butchers, frees Glenn, Daryl and Bob, and they fight their way out of the building. Outside, Terminus is in chaos. Walkers are everywhere. Buildings are on fire. Carol meets them outside. She takes them 100 feet away from the train car. Carol meets them outside. She takes them to a small cabin in the woods where Tyrese has been watching baby Judith. Tyrese had been left to guard a Terminus member named Martin, who tried to talk his way out of being a prisoner. Tyrese, who is one of the gentlest men in this entire story, had to beat Martin nearly to death with his bare hands when Martin threatened Judith. It's another example of what this world does to people. Even the kind ones have to find violence inside themselves, or they don't survive. Rick sees his daughter alive. He picks her up and holds her against his chest and just breathes. Then he looks at Carol, the woman he banished from the group just weeks ago for killing 2 sick people at the prison without the group's consent, and he says, "Did you do that?" She nods. He pulls her into a hug. No grudge, no lingering anger, just gratitude. Carol saved them all and Rick knows it, and whatever happened before doesn't matter anymore. The remaining Terminus survivors, led by Gareth, track Rick's group to a church run by Father Gabriel Stokes. Gabriel is a priest who survived by locking his doors, while his congregation screamed and pounded on the walls outside, begging to be let in as the walkers tore them apart. He listened to them die. He heard children screaming, and he didn't open the door. He's been living alone in that church ever since, eating canned goods from the food drive, sleeping in the pews, and slowly drowning in guilt. Someone scratched the words, "You'll burn for this," into the side of the building. Gabriel sees it every time he walks outside. Bob is kidnapped from outside the church by Gareth's group one night. They take him to a nearby elementary school, and they eat his leg. They cook it over a campfire right in front of him, and Gareth takes a bite and tells Bob, "If it makes you feel any better, you taste much better than we thought you would." It's horrifying, but then Bob starts laughing. He laughs and pulls down his shirt to reveal a bite wound on his shoulder. "Tainted meat," he screams. "You're eating tainted meat." The Terminus survivors panic, spitting and gagging, but Gareth angrily kicks Bob unconscious, pointing out that they cooked him, so it should be fine. They dump Bob outside the church as a message. Rick organises a plan. He pretends to take most of the group away from the church to hunt the Terminus survivors at the school, but it's a trap. The Terminus survivors sneak into the church expecting to find only women, children, and the wounded. Instead, Rick steps out of the shadows behind them. Rick promised Gareth that he'd kill him with a red-handled machete. He keeps that promise. In the candlelight of Father Gabriel's church, Rick hacks Gareth apart. Sasha kills one. Abraham kills another. Michonne finishes the rest. Gabriel opens the door afterward and looks at the blood on the floor of his sanctuary and says this is the Lord's house. And Maggie, standing over a corpse, replies, "No, it's just 4 walls and a roof." Bob dies the next morning. He asks Rick to bring Judith to him, jokes that he trusts the baby more than anyone, and tells Rick not to let the world change who he is. "Nightmares end," Bob says. "They shouldn't end who you are." Sasha stays by his side until the end. Tyrese handles what comes after, using the knife Sasha gave him, so his sister doesn't have to. It's a small, quiet death compared to the violence surrounding it. But Bob's words stick with Rick. Nightmares end. They shouldn't end who you are. That's a nice sentiment. The question is whether Rick can live by it. Abraham wants to continue to Washington, D.C. Eugene Porter has been claiming he knows what caused the outbreak and can stop it if he can reach the capital. He's a mullet-wearing, self-proclaimed scientist who talks in a way that makes him sound smart enough that people believe him. He uses big words and technical jargon and obscure references, and it all sounds very convincing if you don't know better. Abraham believes him completely. Abraham lost his entire family, his wife and children, who were so terrified by the violence they'd witnessed Abraham commit to protect them that they fled in the night and were killed by walkers. Eugene gave Abraham a reason to keep living, a mission, a purpose. Without that mission, Abraham has nothing. The group splits. Abraham, Eugene, Rosita, Glenn, Maggie and Tara head for DC. The rest stay at the church to wait for Daryl and Carol, who went after a car they spotted with a white cross in the rear window, a car connected to whoever took Beth Green. On the road to Washington, the truth comes out. They're on a bridge, walkers approaching from both sides, and Eugene admits it. He doesn't know anything. He's not a scientist. He has no idea what caused the outbreak or how to fix it. He lied because he was afraid, and he knew that as long as people believed he was valuable, they'd keep him alive. He's a coward who used the one thing he had, his ability to sound smart, to manipulate brave people into protecting him. Abraham nearly beats Eugene to death. He punches him over and over until Eugene drops unconscious, bleeding on the asphalt. Rosita has to pull Abraham off of him, and then Abraham just drops to his knees on the road and sobs. Because the mission was the only thing keeping him together. The cure was the only reason he was still alive. And it was a lie. The mission collapses. There is no cure. There was never a cure. Rick's group eventually reunites after a series of events involving Beth's rescue from Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, which ends in tragedy. Dawn, the officer running the hospital, shoots Beth in the head during a tense prisoner exchange, and Daryl immediately kills Dawn in return. The group carries Beth's body out of the hospital. Maggie, who had just arrived believing she was about to see her sister alive, collapses. It's another brutal loss in a show that never runs out of them. After Beth's funeral, the group heads north. They're starving, exhausted, losing hope. They've been on the road for weeks. The water is gone. The food is gone. Their spirits are gone. At one point, they're so weak that they can barely fight off a small group of walkers. They find some bottles of water on the road with a note that says, "From a friend," and Rick refuses to let anyone drink it because it could be poisoned. A storm hits and they shelter in a barn, and during the night, a herd passes so close that the group has to hold the barn doors shut with their bodies, while the wind howls and the walkers press against the wood. A man named Aaron approaches them the next morning and says he's from a walled community called the Alexandria Safe Zone. He has pictures, clean houses, solar panels, running water, gardens. It looks like a suburb that somehow survived the apocalypse. Aaron is earnest, a little nerdy, and clearly terrified of Rick's group, which tells you something about how they look to outsiders at this point. These aren't the scared survivors who limped into the quarry camp. These are hardened, suspicious, dangerous people. Rick doesn't trust Aaron. Of course he doesn't. He's seen Woodbury. He's seen Terminus. Every place that seemed safe turned out to be a trap, or a lie, or something worse than what was outside the walls. But they go because what choice do they have? Judith needs formula. The group needs food. They're running out of road and running out of time. Alexandria is real. It's run by a former congresswoman named Deanna Monroe, who interviews each new arrival on camera, asking them about their past, their skills, what they can contribute. The houses are intact, the electricity works, children ride bikes on clean streets. There's a pantry full of food, there's running water, people host dinner parties. Aaron and his boyfriend Eric collect license plates as a hobby. Rick shaves his beard. Jesse Anderson, a neighbour, brings him supplies and gives him a haircut. He puts on a constable's uniform, the same kind of uniform he wore back in King County, and for a moment, just a brief moment, he looks like the man he used to be. like the guy who ate burgers with Shane in the cruiser. But the eyes are different. The man inside the uniform has seen things and done things that the residents of Alexandria can't even imagine. Because underneath that fresh haircut and those clean clothes, Rick is calculating. He sees these people with their book clubs and their pasta makers and their dinner parties, and he thinks they're living in a fantasy. They've been behind walls since the beginning. They've never had to fight. They've never lost anyone in front of them. They don't understand how fragile all of this is, how quickly it can be taken away by people who are stronger and hungrier and more desperate. He tells Carol and Daryl that if the Alexandrians can't make it, the group will take the place from them. They'll do it cleanly if they can, roughly if they have to. But this place is too good to let weak people squander it. Carol puts on an act that deserves some kind of award. She dresses in pastel cardigans and khaki pants. She brings casseroles to neighbours. She tells people she misses her husband Ed, who in reality was a violent abuser she's glad is dead. She talks about how she was always the den mother at church, how she loves cooking, how she's just so grateful to be somewhere safe. And while everyone smiles at the nice lady with the cookies, Carol is stealing guns from the armory and stashing them for the group. If things go sideways, they'll be armed and ready. Rick discovers that Pete Anderson, the community's only surgeon, has been beating his wife, Jessie. He sees the bruises she tries to hide. He notices how Sam, her youngest son, is terrified to be in the same room as his father. He recognises the dynamic because he's a former cop and he's seen it before. He wants to intervene. Deanna says no. Pete is too valuable as a doctor. The community needs a surgeon more than it needs justice. That calculation, that coldness, bothers Rick in a deep way, because it's the kind of math the New World runs on. Useful people get protected even when they're monsters, and Rick can't accept that. He confronts Pete. They fight in the street, crashing through Jessie's front window, tumbling into the street, blood everywhere. It's ugly and public and everyone watches. Rick ends up standing in the middle of the road with a gun in his hand, blood dripping from his face, waving the weapon at the gathered residents. "Know what it's like out there," he says. "Know what it's like out there," he says. "I do." Michonne walks up behind him and knocks him unconscious with a punch. It's not Rick's finest moment, but it reveals something important about where he is psychologically. He's been in survival mode for so long, fighting so hard for so long, that he's forgotten how to exist in a place where people aren't actively trying to kill him. Alexandria feels fake to him, dangerous in its softness, and softness, in Rick's experience, gets people killed. The situation resolves at a community meeting where Pete shows up drunk with a sword and accidentally kills Reg, Deanna's husband, while trying to attack Rick. Deanna, her husband bleeding out in her arms, looks up at Rick and says, "Do it." Rick shoots Pete in the head. It's the first execution in Alexandria, and standing just outside the gate, having just arrived, watching the whole thing, is a man named Morgan Jones, Rick's old friend from King County, the first person who helped him after the world ended, and the look on Morgan's face says he barely recognises the man holding the smoking gun. Things settle for a brief, fragile moment, and then they get much worse. The Wolves, a group of savage humans who carve W's into their foreheads and kill without purpose or reason, attack Alexandria while most of the fighters are away dealing with the quarry herd. They come in over the walls with knives and machetes and hatchets, and they start butchering people. Not for food, not for territory. Just because they believe that people aren't meant to survive this world. That killing is the natural order. That the living are already dead and just don't know it yet. Carol saves Alexandria. She sees the attack beginning from inside a house, puts on a wolf's disguise, walks through the chaos, and starts killing them one by one with cold efficiency. She slits throats. She shoots attackers mid-swing. She does it all while still wearing the cardigan she uses for her helpless housewife act. Morgan, who has adopted a strict no-killing philosophy, is horrified. He captures a wolf and tries to talk him down. The wolf tries to kill him. This fundamental disagreement between Carol's pragmatism and Morgan's pacifism becomes one of the show's recurring tensions. The quarry herd is a different kind of problem. A massive sinkhole near Alexandria has been acting as a natural trap, collecting walkers by the thousands. The group develops a plan to redirect the herd away from the safe zone, using cars and volunteers as noisemakers to guide them along a specific route. But the plan goes wrong when a horn blares from inside Alexandria during the wolves' attack, drawing half the herd directly toward the community. A truck crashes into one of the guard towers, weakening it, and the tower eventually collapses onto the wall, creating a breach. Walkers flood into Alexandria by the hundreds. The streets that had children riding bikes just weeks ago are now filled with the dead. Rick organizes the survivors. They have to move through the streets to get to the armory and then push the walkers out through the breach. He uses the old trick again, the one from Atlanta. Cover yourselves in walker guts. Hold hands, move slowly, don't make a sound. Rick takes the lead, holding Carl's hand on one side and Jesse's hand on the other. They form a chain and shuffle through the herd. It falls apart because of Sam, Jesse's youngest son, maybe 8 or 9, who has been deteriorating mentally since the wolves' attack, who has been too scared to come downstairs in his own house for days, starts whimpering. He can't stop. He's frozen in the street, crying softly, and the walkers hear him. They turn. They reach for him. He screams. The walkers take him. Jessie sees her son die, and she screams, and the walkers swarm her too. She's being pulled down, but her hand is locked onto Carl's wrist in a death grip, and she won't let go, even as the walkers tear into her. Rick looks at his son being dragged toward the herd by a dead woman's hand, and he does the only thing he can. He takes a hatchet and chops Jesse's hand off at the wrist. Carl is free. But Jesse's older son, Ron, who has been nursing a grudge against Rick since Rick killed his father, Pete, pulls a gun. He aims it at Rick. Michonne reacts instantly, driving her katana through Ron's chest. But as Ron falls, his gun goes off. The bullet hits Carl in the right eye. Rick carries Carl to the infirmary. He hands his bleeding, unconscious son to the doctor, Denise, and says, "Please save him. Please." And then Rick does something that defies explanation. He walks outside alone into the street full of walkers, and he starts killing them. Not strategically, not with a plan. He just starts swinging his hatchet, one after another, in a kind of furious, grief-stricken trance. He's not trying to clear the town. Then Aaron, then the Alexandrians, 1 by 1, then the Alexandrians, 2 by 2, then the Alexandrians, 3 by 3, then the Alexandrians, 4 by 4, then the Alexandrians, 5 by 5, then the Alexandrians, 6 by 6, then the Alexandrians, 7 by 7, then the Alexandrians, 8 by 8, then the Alexandrians, 9 by 9, then the Alexandrians, 10 by 10, then the Alexandrians, 11 by 11, then the Alexandrians, 12 by 12, then the Alexandrians, 13 by 13, then the Alexandrians, 14 by 14, then the Alexandrians, 15 by 15, then the Alexandrians, 16 by 16, then the Alexandrians, 17 by 17, then the Alexandrians, 18 by 18, then the Alexandrians, 19 by 19, then the Alexandrians, 20 by 20, then the Alexandrians, 21 by 21, then the Alexandrians, 22 by 22, then the Alexandrians, 23 by 23, then the Alexandrians, 24 by 24, then the Alexandrians, 25 by 25, then the Alexandrians, 26 by 26, then the Alexandrians, 27 by 27, then the Alexandrians, 28 by 28, then the Alexandrians, 29 by 29, then the Alexandrians, 30 by 30, then the Alexandrians, 31 by 31, then the Alexandrians, 32 by 32, Then the Alexandrians 33 by 33. Then the Alexandrians 34 by 34. Then the Alexandrians 35 by 35. Then the Alexandrians 36 by 36. Then the Alexandrians 37 by 37. Then the Alexandrians 38 by 38. Then the Alexandrians 39 by 39. Then the Alexandrians 40 by 40. Then the Alexandrians 41 by 41. Then the Alexandrians 42 by 42. Then the Alexandrians 43 by 43. Then the Alexandrians 44 by 44. Then the Alexandrians 45 by 45. Then the Alexandrians 46 by 46. Then the Alexandrians 47 by 47. Then the Alexandrians 48 by 48. Then the Alexandrians 49 by 49. Then the Alexandrians 50 by 50. Then the Alexandrians 51 by 51. Then the Alexandrians 52 by 52. Then the Alexandrians 53 by 53. Then Aaron. Then the Alexandrians, one by one, every person who can hold a weapon picks one up and follows Rick into the street. Daryl and Sasha and Abraham, who had been dealing with a saviour situation outside the walls, arrive with a fuel truck and use the fuel to create a lake of fire at the community pond, drawing the walkers in. The community fights through the entire night. By dawn, the walkers are dead. The streets are littered with corpses, and Alexandria still stands. Because Rick Grimes walked out the door first, and people followed him. Carl survives. He loses the eye, but he survives. The bandage becomes as much a part of his identity as the hat. And during the days that follow, while Rick is sitting by Carl's bed watching him sleep, something shifts in Rick again. Alexandria isn't just a place anymore. It's not a resource to be taken or a fantasy to be corrected. It's home. These people, the ones who picked up shovels and bats and kitchen knives and followed him into the dark, they're his people now too. All of them. And then, on a quiet night after Carl starts recovering, something happens that the show had been building toward for years without ever forcing it. Rick and Michonne are sitting on a couch together in Rick's house. They've been through everything at this point. They've fought side by side, they've protected each other's children, they've buried people they loved, they've sat in silence and known exactly what the other was thinking. And without any big dramatic build-up, without a love triangle, or a jealousy arc, or a sweeping orchestral score, they hold hands, they look at each other, they lean in, they kiss, they fall asleep together. And when they wake up in the morning, Michonne's katana is propped against the bedside table, and Rick's gun is on the nightstand, and it's the most natural thing in the world. Like it was always going to happen. Like the only question was when. I really love how the show handled that. No manufactured drama, no will they won't they teasing across 20 episodes. Just two people who've earned each other reaching out at the same time. Rick and Michonne work as a couple because they're equals. She doesn't need him to save her. He doesn't need her to fix him. They choose each other fully and freely because life is short and the world is hard, and finding someone who understands you completely is the rarest thing there is. Alexandria attracts attention though, and not the good kind. Rick's group makes contact with a community called the Hilltop, run by a man named Gregory, who tells them about a group called the Saviors. The Saviors are led by a man named Negan, and they operate like a protection racket on a massive scale. They take half of what the Hilltop produces, half the food, half the medicine, half of everything, in exchange for not killing them. If a community falls behind on tribute, people die. If someone tries to resist, more people die. It's a system built on fear and enforced with absolute violence, and it works because the Saviors are everywhere. Rick strikes a deal with Gregory and the Hilltop. His group will eliminate the Saviors in exchange for food and supplies. At this point, Rick doesn't know how big the Saviors are. He thinks they're a moderate-sized group operating out of a single compound. He's wrong, But he doesn't know that yet. They attack a savior outpost at night. Rick's group moves through the building methodically, clearing room by room, killing dozens of men in their sleep. Glenn kills a man for the first time. He does it to save Heath, but afterward he sits against a wall and stares at his hands, and you can see the cost of it on his face. This is a man who once risked his life to save a stranger in a tank, and now he's killing people in their beds. It's necessary, probably, but necessity doesn't make it painless. They think they've won. The outpost is cleared. The saviors are dealt with. It feels decisive, clean, but they haven't dealt with anything. They've barely scratched the surface. The saviors are enormous. Hundreds of people spread across dozens of outposts, connected by a communication network and a supply chain, and a leader who treats empire building the way other people treat hobbies. And the man at the top is someone you do not underestimate. Rick finds this out the hard way. On a run to get Maggie to the hilltop for medical help, because something is wrong with her pregnancy, the group's RV is intercepted by the saviors. Every road is blocked. Every alternate route has a savior patrol waiting with guns and spotlights. They try to go through the woods, on foot, carrying Maggie on a stretcher, and the saviors are there too. It's methodical and it's terrifying because it demonstrates a level of organisation, planning and manpower that Rick's group simply cannot match. This isn't a gang. This isn't a compound. This is a military operation with hundreds of soldiers and a chain of command that stretches across the entire region. They're herded into a clearing in the woods at night, forced to kneel in the dirt. Over 100 saviors surround them with guns and vehicle-mounted floodlights. The light is blinding. Rick can barely see. An RV door opens somewhere behind the glare, and then footsteps, heavy boots on gravel, a whistle, and Negan steps into the light. He's tall. He's carrying a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. He calls it Lucille, named after his dead wife. And he is, without question, the most charismatic and terrifying villain the show ever produced. He doesn't sneak up on you like the governor. Delivers a long, almost theatrical monologue. He paces back and forth in front of the kneeling group. He makes eye contact with each person. He comments on their courage, their foolishness, the fact that they killed his people. He's not angry exactly, he's amused, and that's what makes it so scary. This is a man who has done this before. Many times. He has a system, and Rick's group is about to learn how that system works. Negan plays eeny, meeny, miny, mo, with Lucille raised over his head, pointing at one person, then the next, then the next. The bat lands on Abraham Ford. Negan swings. Abraham takes the first blow and sits back up, looks Negan dead in the eyes and says, "Suck my nuts." It's the most Abraham thing he could possibly say, defiant to the absolute end. Negan laughs and appreciates the bravery, genuinely, and then he hits him again, and again, and again, until there's nothing recognizable left. The group is frozen. Some are crying, some are in shock. Rosita is staring at the ground where Abraham was just kneeling, and then Daryl, who is physically incapable of watching someone he cares about die without doing something, lunges at Negan and punches him in the face. Negan barely flinches. He hands Lucille to one of his men. He points at Daryl and says, "That is a no-no. The whole thing is about you guys not doing that." And then, without hesitation, he turns the bat on Glenn. The first hit splits Glenn's skull open. His left eye pops out of its socket, pushed forward by the swelling. He's still alive. He's trying to speak. He turns to Maggie, his pregnant wife, the love of his life, and he forces out 2 words. "Maggie, I'll find you." And then Negan finishes him. I know that's hard to hear. It was hard to watch. It was hard to even read in the script when it leaked years ago. Glenn was the first person to save Rick Grimes in this story. The voice on the tank radio. The guy who ran into danger to help a stranger. He was kind and brave and good, and he died on his knees in the dirt because Daryl threw a punch. and Negan needed to make a point. Maggie. I don't think I can adequately describe what that scene does to Maggie. She's on her knees, sick, barely able to hold herself up, watching the father of her unborn child get beaten to death 3 feet away. And she can't do anything. Nobody can. That's the lesson. That's what Negan is teaching them. You are powerless. I decide who lives and who dies. This is how it works now. But he's not done with Rick. Not even close. He drags Rick into the RV and drives him out into a field thick with fog and walkers. He puts Rick's axe on the roof of the RV and tells him to go get it. Rick has to climb onto the roof of a moving vehicle, surrounded by fog, with walkers grabbing at him from every direction, and retrieve the axe. It's not about the axe. It's about obedience. Negan is training Rick the way you'd train an animal. When they return to the clearing, Negan puts the axe in Rick's hand and tells him to cut off Carl's left arm. If he doesn't, every single person in the line dies. All of them. Michonne, Daryl, Maggie, Rosita, everyone. Rick is destroyed. He's shaking so badly he can barely hold the axe. He's begging. He's offering himself. He'll do anything. Cut off his own arm. Kill himself. Anything but this. Negan counts down. Rick raises the axe. His face is a mask of anguish so complete it barely looks human. Carl is looking up at his father, and he says, "Just do it, Dad." And at the last possible second, Negan stops him. He's satisfied. Rick is broken. The light in his eyes is gone. That's what Negan wanted, not to kill Rick, to own him, to take everything Rick had, his fight, his pride, his sense of agency, his identity as a protector, and replace it with compliance. Rick goes back to Alexandria, a different man. He walks differently. He talks differently. When Negan shows up at the gates with his saviors, Rick holds the door open. When Negan takes their guns, their mattresses, their food, Rick watches. When Negan makes crude jokes and swings Lucille in the living room of Rick's own house, Rick says nothing. He just stands there, hollow, holding Lucille when Negan hands it to him, like a dog holding a leash. The saviors take half of everything. That's the deal. Half the food, half the medicine, half the ammo, half the supplies. And if they're ever short, there are consequences. Negan's lieutenants, Simon, Dwight, Gavin, they each manage a different community. They show up on schedule, take what they're owed, and leave. And if anyone resists, if anyone hides anything, if anyone so much as looks at a savior wrong, people die. Daryl is taken as a prisoner. He's locked in a dark cell at the sanctuary, forced to listen to the same cheerful pop song, on repeat, hour after hour, day after day. They feed him dog food sandwiches. They make him wear a sweatshirt with the letter A on it. It's sensory deprivation, mixed with humiliation, designed to break his will. Dwight, who is himself trapped in Negan's system, is assigned to break Daryl. He shows Daryl a Polaroid photo of Glenn's bashed-in skull and tells him this is what happens when people don't kneel. Daryl doesn't break. He never does, but he suffers. Spencer, one of the Alexandrians, Deanna's surviving son, decides he's smarter than Rick. He approaches Negan directly and suggests that he should be leading Alexandria instead. He tells Negan that Rick is dangerous, unstable, a liability. Negan listens with that big grin of his, nodding along, and then he guts Spencer in the middle of the street. He pulls a knife and opens Spencer's abdomen, and Spencer's insides spill onto the pavement. "I just had a thought," Negan says, looking down at the mess. "Maybe you didn't have any guts after all." Then he turns to the gathered Alexandrians and says, "At least Rick Grimes has guts." Rosita, fueled by rage and grief over Abraham's death, tries to assassinate Negan with a single homemade bullet. She gets one shot, she misses, hitting Lucille instead of Negan's face. Negan has Olivia, an innocent bystander, killed as punishment. He takes Eugene as a prisoner because Eugene confessed to making the bullet. And he leaves Alexandria with a smile and a wave as if he's just had a lovely visit. These are the darkest days. Rick is subservient. The community is starving. People are dying of preventable illnesses because the saviors took the medicine cabinets. And Rick just takes it. He takes it and takes it because the alternative is Negan bringing Lucille down on someone else he loves. But Rick is not staying broken forever. Quietly, slowly, painfully, he starts building an alliance. It begins with a trip to the Hilltop. The Hilltop is an agricultural community built around a colonial-era mansion called Barrington House. It's run by Gregory, a cowardly, self-serving leader who makes deals with Negan because he's too afraid to fight. But Maggie is there now, and Maggie is becoming something Gregory never was, a real leader. She's grieving, she's pregnant, she's furious, and she's organizing. She talks to the Hilltop's people. She earns their trust. She shows them that fighting back isn't just possible, it's necessary. Gregory resents her for it, but he's too weak to stop her. Rick reaches out to the kingdom, a community built in an abandoned school, led by Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a former zookeeper who speaks in theatrical Old English, wears a leather coat like a medieval king, and has a pet tiger named Shiver. It sounds ridiculous. It is a little. But Ezekiel adopted the persona deliberately. He knows people need something to believe in. He knows that a king on a throne with a tiger at his side gives people courage they wouldn't have otherwise. And Shiva is real. She's a Bengal tiger that Ezekiel saved from the zoo when it was overrun. She imprinted on him and follows him like a dog. People see the tiger and they believe in the king. That's the trick. That's the whole thing. Ezekiel is reluctant to fight. The kingdom has a secret deal with the saviors, making regular drops of food and supplies to keep the peace. His people don't even know. He's been protecting them through appeasement, and he's afraid that war will cost more than compliance. But his right-hand man, a former football player named Jerry, who carries an axe and calls Ezekiel "Your Majesty" with total sincerity, knows the truth. And so does a fighter named Richard, who has been trying to provoke a war with the saviors for months. When the saviors kill a young kingdom member named Benjamin, a kid Ezekiel had been mentoring, a kid who reminded him of his own lost hope for the future, Ezekiel changes his mind. He looks at Morgan, who's been living at the kingdom trying to find peace, and says, "I call on the kingdom to join the fight." Rick also tries to make a deal with the scavengers, a junkyard community led by a woman named Jadis, who speaks in clipped, strange sentences, with most of the articles removed from her speech. "We take, we don't bother," she says. Her people live among mountains of garbage and seem to have created their own peculiar culture. Rick offers them guns in exchange for their support. Jadis agrees, but she's already hedging her bets, negotiating with Negan behind Rick's back. Trust is a currency in the New World, and Jadis spends it carelessly. With the Hilltop, the kingdom, and supposedly the scavengers behind him, Rick has an army. It's not a big army, it's not a well-equipped army, but it's an army of people who have decided, each for their own reasons, that they'd rather fight and maybe die than live on their knees. The war begins. Rick, Maggie, and Ezekiel stand on a stage in front of their combined forces and give a speech. Rick tells them they're fighting for their futures, for a bigger world. This isn't just about revenge, though revenge is certainly part of it. It's about the right to exist without someone's boot on their neck. Maggie speaks for the Hilltop with the quiet authority she's grown into since Glenn's death. Ezekiel speaks for the kingdom with theatrical grandeur, his voice booming, his tiger Shiva sitting beside him. Together, the three of them represent something that hasn't existed since the world fell apart. A genuine coalition of free people standing up and saying enough. The first strike is bold and meticulously planned. A caravan of armoured vehicles, retrofitted school buses and trucks with metal plates welded to the sides, rolls up to the sanctuary, Negan's home base. Rick stands at the front and delivers an ultimatum to Negan's lieutenants through a bullhorn. He gives them a choice: surrender and this ends. The saviors can walk away. Nobody else has to die. When they refuse, the militias open fire, shattering every window in the building. Then, using a plan Daryl and the others have been working on for weeks, they lead a massive walker herd to surround the sanctuary. Thousands of walkers, drawn by noise and movement, pressing against the fences. The saviors are trapped inside their own fortress with no power. Dwindling food and the constant groaning of the dead on every side. It's a good plan. It almost works. But wars don't go according to plan. The kingdom takes devastating losses at one of the savior outposts. Ezekiel leads his soldiers into what he thinks is a cleared building, and it's an ambush. A heavy machine gun opens up from a second-story window and cuts down nearly everyone. Dozens of Ezekiel's people who followed him because he made them believe they could be brave, die in seconds. The survivors retreat into the woods carrying Ezekiel, who is injured and in shock. They're pursued by walkers, attracted to the gunfire. And Shiva, Ezekiel's tiger, the animal that made the king feel real, that gave people something to believe in, charges into the walkers. To save him, they swarm her. She goes down fighting. Ezekiel watches and says, "I'm not a king, I'm just some guy." And Jerry, his loyal right hand, says, "You're still my king." It's one of the most heartbreaking exchanges in the whole series. Meanwhile, Rick encounters someone from another life entirely. While clearing a savior outpost, he finds himself held at gunpoint by Morales, a man from the original Atlanta camp, the very first group Rick joined after waking up. Morales left early in Season 1, heading for Birmingham with his wife and 2 kids. Rick never saw him again. Now, years later, Morales is a savior. His family is dead. He's hardened and bitter, and he tells Rick they're both monsters, just on different sides. Before they can really talk, before Rick can process this ghost from his past, Daryl appears and puts a crossbow bolt through Morales' head. "I know who that was," Rick says quietly. "It doesn't matter," Daryl replies. "Not one little bit." And tactically, Daryl is right, but it matters to Rick. Seeing Morales, seeing what the world turned him into, reminds Rick that the line between who he is and who the saviors are is thinner than he'd like to admit. The scavengers betray Rick. Jadis made a secret deal with Negan, offering to double-cross Rick's alliance in exchange for better terms. When Rick leads the scavengers to the sanctuary, expecting to find it surrounded by walkers, the walkers are gone, and the saviors are waiting with guns drawn. Rick barely escapes, abandoned by Jadis and her people, rescued at the last second by Carol and Jerry. He takes a rifle, climbs a water tower, and looks down at the sanctuary to see the front gate wide open and the walker herd cleared away. Someone helped them, someone on the inside, and that realization that there's a traitor in the alliance makes everything more dangerous. And then, in the middle of all of this, something happens that changes everything. Carl is in the woods helping a stranger named Siddiq capture a walker for some kind of religious practice. Siddiq is a young man who believes in honoring the dead, a tradition from his mother's faith. Carl found him earlier and wanted to help because Carl still believes in people. Even after everything, after the governor and Terminus and the wolves and Negan, Carl Grimes still looks at a stranger and sees someone worth saving. That's Laurie's influence, probably. Or maybe it's the best of Rick, the part of Rick that stopped to help a woman in a park and said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." During the struggle with the walkers, one of them bites Carl on the side of his abdomen. He kills the walker. He looks down at the wound, and he makes a choice. He doesn't tell anyone. He wraps the wound and buttons his shirt and walks back to Alexandria, knowing that he's going to die. He spends his last hours writing letters, one to Rick, one to Michonne, one to Negan, one to Enid. He takes care of Judith. He takes a Polaroid photo of himself holding his baby sister so that she'll have something to remember him by when she's older. He maps out the sewer system so that the group will have an escape route when the saviors attack. He's not panicking. He's being methodical, responsible. He's doing what his mother told him to do, what his father taught him by example. Take care of the people you love, even when you can't take care of yourself. When the Saviors attack Alexandria with grenade launchers and the community is forced into the sewers, Carl reveals the bite. He lifts his shirt and there it is, the wound red and angry and spreading. Everyone sees it, Rick sees it. Time stops. I want to sit with this for a moment because I think this is the single most devastating event in Rick Grimes' entire story. Not Laurie's death, not the bridge, not the years with the CRM. This, because Rick's entire existence since the moment he woke up in that hospital has been organised around one thing and one thing only: keep Carl alive. Every moral compromise, every act of violence, every time Rick crossed a line, it was for Carl. Carl was the reason Rick bit Joe's throat out. Carl was the reason Rick killed Shane. Carl was the reason Rick got up every morning and kept going when the world gave him every reason to stop. And now Carl is going to die, and Rick cannot stop it. There's no enemy to fight. There's no wall to build. There's no surgery to perform. It's a bite. It's always been a bite. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that Rick Grimes can do. Carl doesn't rage. He doesn't cry much. He's calm in a way that feels older than his years. He gives Rick the letters. He tells his father about a vision he has of the future. A dream where Rick is older, his beard white, and Alexandria is peaceful. Flowers everywhere, kids playing. And in that dream, Negan is alive. He's working in a garden. He's part of the community. He says good morning to Rick, and Rick says good morning back. Carl's dying wish is for his father to stop fighting, to find mercy, to build the world they always talked about instead of burning it down in revenge. You can still be who you were, Carl tells Rick. That's my wish for you. Carl dies in the early hours of the morning. Rick and Michonne are with him in the burned-out shell of a church that Alexandria used for community gatherings. Michonne holds his hand. Rick tells him he's going to be okay, which is a lie, but it's the kind of lie a father tells. Carl says his goodbyes, and then he's gone. Rick and Michonne bury Carl together under a tree near a small church with stained glass windows. They sit there for a long time, and Rick reads the letter. Carl wrote, "Dad, I know you're going to be angry. I know you're going to want revenge. But this is the way. You have to find a way forward. You have to give them a way out, because we can change. We can still be who we were." The war continues, but Rick is different now. The rage is still there, but it's layered with something else. Purpose, maybe, or grief so deep it's become a kind of clarity. He carries Carl's letter everywhere. He reads it at night. He thinks about the dream Carl described, the one with Negan in the garden, and the flowers, and the peace. And he doesn't know if he can get there, but Carl asked him to try. The final battle comes at the hilltop. Both sides have been bloodied. Both sides have lost people. Eugene, who was taken by Negan and forced to manufacture ammunition for the Saviors, has been secretly sabotaging the bullets, making them faulty. It's a small act of rebellion from a man who has spent his entire life pretending to be something he's not, and it's the thing that tips the scales. Rick reads Carl's letter one more time before the fight. Then he walks out into the field where Negan is waiting. They talk. Rick tells Negan about Carl, about the dream, about the future Carl imagined. He asks Negan for 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds to consider what could be. Negan listens. For a moment, just a heartbeat. It looks like Negan might actually be moved. He looks down, and Rick counts. When Rick reaches the count, he slashes Negan's throat with a piece of stained glass from a church window that Carl used to visit. Negan drops to his knees, blood pouring from his neck, eyes wide with shock. Behind the lines, Maggie is screaming. She's screaming for Rick to let Negan die. Negan killed her husband. He bashed Glenn's skull in while she watched. Maggie has earned Negan's death more than anyone alive. She's been carrying that grief and that rage for over a year, and she wants this man to bleed out in the dirt. But Rick looks at Sadiq, the man Carl died saving, the living proof that Carl's instinct to help strangers was worth something, and says, "Save him." Sadiq kneels beside Negan and begins working on the wound. Maggie collapses. Michonne catches her. Maggie is sobbing and fighting and asking why. Why would Rick do this? How could he do this? And Rick stands there, covered in blood, and tells the gathered crowd, saviors and militia members alike, that this is not how it ends. The killing stops here. Negan's way of doing things is over, and anyone, savior or otherwise, who wants to be part of what comes next, who wants to build instead of destroy, is welcome. But this, the fighting, the war, the cycle of revenge and retaliation, it ends today. It's the most controversial decision Rick Grimes ever makes, and I think about it a lot. He didn't forgive Negan. I don't think Rick ever forgives Negan for what he did. He spared him because his dying son asked him to. He chose Carl's memory over his own rage, and whether that's weakness or strength depends entirely on who you ask. Maggie sees it as a betrayal. Daryl isn't sure what to think, but I think it's the bravest thing Rick ever did, because killing Negan would have been easy. Killing Negan would have felt righteous and satisfying and just. Living with the decision not to kill him, carrying the weight of mercy when every fibre of your being screams for vengeance, that's the hard part. That's the thing that takes real courage. Time passes, about 1.5 years after the war ends. The world doesn't magically get better, but it gets different. Rick is leading a massive construction project, a bridge that will connect the communities and allow trade and travel between Alexandria, the hilltop, the kingdom, the sanctuary, and Oceanside, a coastal community of women who lost their men to the saviors and have been surviving on their own. The bridge is more than engineering. It's Carl's vision made physical, a literal connection between people who used to be enemies. If a farmer at the hilltop grows more corn than they need, they can send it to the kingdom. If Oceanside catches more fish than they can eat, the surplus goes to Alexandria. It's an economy, a society, the beginnings of something that might, if it works, look like the world Rick left behind. But it's not going well. The saviors resent being treated like second-class citizens. They do the hardest work on the bridge, but get the least say in how things are run. Several former saviors have disappeared, and there are rumours of a new threat in the woods. People called the Whisperers, who wear masks made of walker skin, though nobody takes those stories seriously yet. Justin, a saviour working the bridge, gets into fights with other workers. Tensions are constant. Maggie still hasn't forgiven Rick for keeping Negan alive. She visits Negan in his cell one night, stands in front of the bars, and tells him she came to kill him. Negan, who has been alone in that cell for 1.5 years, actually wants her to do it. He tells her about Lucille, not the bat, but his wife, the real Lucille. He tells Maggie how she got cancer, how he wasn't there for her, how she died alone because he was out doing terrible things he thought would help. And Maggie sees something she didn't expect. She sees a man who is already suffering. She leaves without killing him. But she doesn't forgive Rick either. Rick and Michonne are together. They have Judith, who is growing up fast, already showing signs of the warrior and the leader she'll become. And Michonne is pregnant with their son, a child Rick will name RJ, but will never get to raise. Rick doesn't know that yet. He's planning for a future he genuinely believes in. He's put down the gun again, or at least he's trying to. He's leading with his voice instead of his fists. He's building instead of destroying. He still visits Negan in the cell. They have conversations through the bars, quiet and strange, and sometimes almost philosophical. Negan asks Rick how things are going. Rick tells him. It's an odd relationship, not friendship, not exactly, but something that exists because they're the only two people who truly understand what the other went through. Then everything goes wrong one more time. Rick is riding alone near the construction site, checking on progress, when two herds converge. His horse panics. Rick is thrown and lands on a piece of rebar sticking up from a concrete slab. The rebar impales him through the side. He's pinned. Walkers are coming from both directions. He grits his teeth and pulls himself off the rebar, screaming, and blood immediately starts soaking through his shirt. He stumbles away, holding his side, trying to stay ahead of the herd. And this is where the show gives Rick something extraordinary, something it has never quite done before, at least not at this scale. As Rick staggers through the landscape, bleeding out, his vision blurring, he begins to hallucinate, or dream, or visit some other place entirely. The show never quite tells you which, and I think that ambiguity is intentional. He sees Shane first. Shane is leaning against a police car in a parking lot, wearing his deputy uniform, looking exactly the way he did in the very first episode. He's smirking. He's chewing on something. He looks at Rick and says, in that Shane way, that this was always how it was going to end. The two of them, at the end of the road. Rick tells Shane he's looking for his family. Shane laughs. Your family, he says. Is that right? But Shane also keeps Rick moving. He needles him, challenges him, provokes him the way Shane always did, and in doing so, keeps Rick from lying down and dying. Then Rick sees Herschel, beautiful, whole, two-legged Herschel, standing in a field of green crops under a bright sky. Herschel is peaceful. He tells Rick that he needs to wake up, that the people Rick loves need him, that there's still work to do. Herschel's presence is warm and quiet, and it feels like forgiveness, like the farm, like that brief window when everything was almost okay. Then he sees Sasha. She's calm and certain, and she tells Rick that he knows what it is. He knows what he has to do. She doesn't tell him to live or die. She just looks at him with that steadiness she always had, and lets him figure it out. These hallucinations, or visions, or whatever they are, guide Rick forward through the landscape. Every time he starts to collapse, one of them appears. They keep him walking when his body wants to stop. It's as if every person who shaped Rick Grimes is giving him one last push toward the thing he needs to do. Rick reaches the bridge. The herd is behind him, thousands strong, an ocean of dead faces stretching back as far as he can see. Daryl, Michonne, Maggie, Carol and the others arrive on the far bank. They see Rick standing alone on the bridge, barely upright, drenched in blood. They see the herd, and they start to move toward him, ready to fight, ready to make a stand. But Rick sees the dynamite on the bridge, cases of it, left there from the construction. He knows the math. If the herd crosses, it'll reach the communities. People will die. Judith, Michonne, everyone he's fought for, and Rick Grimes has spent the last 9 seasons answering the same question, the same way. How far will you go to protect the people you love? All the way. That's always been the answer. A walker gets close. A crossbow bolt takes it down. Daryl. Even now, Daryl is watching out for him. Rick can hear Michonne calling his name across the distance. He looks at her. Even through the blood and the pain and the haze, he looks at her, and something passes between them. Understanding, maybe. Or goodbye. He raises his python. He says to himself quietly, I found them. Meaning his family. His people. The thing he was looking for ever since he woke up alone in that hospital room. He found them. That's enough. That has to be enough. He pulls the trigger. The dynamite detonates. The bridge explodes in a wall of fire and sound that swallows everything. Michonne screams. She tries to run toward the bridge, but Maggie and Carol hold her back. Daryl stands at the water's edge and weeps. Everyone believes Rick is dead, but he isn't. Downstream, on the riverbank, Anne, the woman formerly known as Jadis from the junkyard, finds Rick barely alive. She radios a helicopter that's been her connection to a mysterious organisation. She tells them she has a bee, someone injured, but strong. They land. Rick is loaded on board, hooked up to medical equipment. Anne tells him it's going to be okay. The helicopter lifts off and flies away. Below, time passes. Seasons change. The bridge is gone. The landscape grows over. 6 years later, a group of survivors is fighting walkers in the woods. They're overwhelmed. Gunshots ring out and the walkers drop. The survivors look around and see a little girl, maybe 9 or 10, wearing a cowboy hat, carrying a revolver and a katana. "I'm Judith," she says. Judith Grimes, Rick's daughter, carrying her father's gun and her mother's sword. Now we need to talk about where Rick went, because for 6 years the people who loved him thought he was dead. They mourned him. Michonne raised Judith and their son, RJ, on her own. Daryl spent years searching for Rick's body along the river. The communities moved on, but Rick Grimes was alive. He just wasn't free. The helicopter took Rick to the Civic Republic of Philadelphia. It's a massive hidden city, over 200,000 people, surrounded by walls and protected by a military organization called the CRM, the Civic Republic Military. From the air, it looks like civilization never ended. There are buildings with lights on, streets with people walking, markets and schools and hospitals. It's the largest surviving community in North America and possibly the world. But the CRM, the military arm that protects it all, is something darker than it appears. They believe they are humanity's last real hope, and to protect that hope, they will do anything. They've destroyed entire communities to keep the Civic Republic's existence a secret. Thousands of people wiped out because they were considered a security risk. The CRM operates on a principle they call security and secrecy above all. If you know about the Civic Republic and you're not inside it, you're a threat, and threats get eliminated. Rick is classified as a consignee. That's their polite term for it. What it actually means is conscripted labour. He's given a kill stick, a metal pole with a blade on the end, and put to work at culling facilities where consignees thin the walker herds that threaten the Republic's perimeter. It's brutal, repetitive, dehumanizing work. You stand in a line with other consignees and you kill walker after walker after walker until the shift is done. There's a sign at one of the facilities that reads, Grimes 68, apparently a record Rick set. Even in forced labour, even broken, Rick Grimes is the most capable person in the room. He tried to escape multiple times. Each attempt was planned and desperate, and each one failed. His first attempt was the most elaborate. He found a walker body, cut off its hand, and left it with his dog tags in a location where it would burn. The CRM would find the charred remains and the tags and conclude that Rick was dead. There's no escape for the living, they say in the Civic Republic, so Rick decided to make them think he was no longer living. He ran. He made it to Rat Island, off the coast somewhere, before they caught him and brought him back. During another escape attempt, he threw a message in a bottle into a river. He also left a bag on a beached boat, Boat 672, containing his phones loaded with pictures of Michonne and Judith. He left them there deliberately, hoping someone would find them, hoping, irrationally maybe, that the items would somehow reach Michonne. Those items would eventually be found by Michonne herself years later, and they would be the clue that told her Rick was alive. But at the time, it was just a man throwing hope into a river and praying. The CRM took Rick's hand. The show doesn't fully detail the circumstances, whether it was punishment for an escape attempt or an injury sustained during one, but Rick now wears a prosthetic. They took his hand, his freedom, and eventually his hope. He writes letters to Michonne that she'll never read, pages and pages front and back, about everything he's seen, everything he's felt, everything he misses. He writes about the sound of Judith's laugh. He writes about the way Michonne holds her katana, not like a weapon, but like an extension of her arm, like it was always there. He writes about Carl. He writes about the farm and the prison and Alexandria and all the places that were supposed to be home. He fills notebooks with words he knows will never reach her. He dreams of Carl at first. In the dreams, they sit together somewhere quiet, sometimes on the porch of a house, sometimes in a field, and they talk. Carl is whole, both eyes intact, and he smiles at Rick the way he used to before the world made him stop smiling. These conversations keep Rick sane. They give him a thread of connection to the person he used to be. When the dreams are over and he wakes up in his bare CRM quarters, he can still feel the warmth of his son sitting beside him. And then one day, Carl stops appearing. No dream, no conversation, just sleep and nothing. Rick tries to will him back. He goes to bed hoping, concentrating on Carl's face, trying to summon his voice. Nothing. Carl is gone from Rick's dreams the way he's gone from the world. And this second loss, this loss of even the memory of comfort, is devastating. Michonne replaces Carl in the dreams for a while. She appears and they hold each other, and Rick feels alive again. But the CRM grinds on, mission after mission, cull after cull, and eventually Michonne fades too. Rick tries to hold onto her face, the curve of her jaw, the way she looks at him when she's amused and trying not to show it. But the details blur, the image dissolves, and then Rick's dreams are just dark. In a letter that serves as a voiceover, one of the most powerful pieces of writing in the entire franchise, Rick tells Michonne everything. He tells her about the escape attempts, about the hand, about losing Carl in his dreams, about losing her. And then he says something that absolutely breaks me every time I think about it. He says, "I love you. I don't see the dead anymore, or the ones I lost, or the sun, the sky, or the water. I don't see you anymore. I just see what's ahead. Metal rotors and gun oil and blood." He tells her he tried. He begs her to understand that he tried as hard as he possibly could. And then he says he's decided to die. Not physically. He'll keep breathing. He'll keep going through the motions. But the Rick who loved and hoped and fought, the Rick who woke up in a hospital and searched for his family, the Rick who built a prison into a home, that man is gone. He burns his letters. He burns his phones. He burns the pictures. He stops trying to escape. He accepts the CRM and becomes what they want him to be, a soldier without a soul. A CRM lieutenant named Okafor takes an interest in Rick. Okafor is a career military man, dedicated to the CRM's mission, but increasingly troubled by its methods. He's found Rick's message in a bottle. Okafor recruits Rick into the frontliners, a family, a community, a whole life that the CRM erased. Instead of reporting this discovery, which would mean Rick's immediate execution, Okafor recruits Rick into the frontliners, the CRM's elite military unit. Okafor is complicated. He genuinely believes the Civic Republic can save the world, but he also knows the institution is rotten at its core. He wants to change it from the inside. And he thinks Rick, with his leadership ability, his tactical mind, and his willingness to do hard things, is the kind of person who could make that change happen. Okafor doesn't want to burn the CRM down. He wants to make it better, and he thinks Rick is the key. Rick tells Okafor a story one night while they're flying in a helicopter. When Rick was 7 years old, he woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen for water. Through the window, he saw the family farm on fire. The whole field was burning. Orange flames against the black sky, smoke so thick you could barely see. Rick was terrified. He couldn't move. His father came and found him. Half his body burned, covered in soot, looking like a monster from a nightmare. "Of the world," his father said. "But it's of the world," his father said. "But it's really just the beginning." Years later, Rick's mother told him the truth. His father started the fire himself. The farm was going to fail. Disease in the soil. Bad season. No money. Burning the crops was the only way to save the land for next year. His father knew what it would look like. He knew people would think he'd lost his mind. But he did it because he understood that sometimes you have to destroy what you've built to protect what matters. And the burn scars his father carried for the rest of his life were a reminder that the sacrifice worked. They kept the farm. They kept the family. That story matters because it's the key to understanding everything Rick does in The Ones Who Live. His father destroyed something to save everything. Rick blew up a bridge. Rick cut off ties to his own identity. Rick let the CRM think they owned him. All of it was a controlled burn. All of it was sacrifice disguised as surrender. Okafor is killed during a mission. His helicopter is shot down by an unknown attacker while they're on a training exercise. The helicopter hits the ground hard. Okafor is pinned in the wreckage. Rick pulls him out, but the injuries are fatal. Okafor dies in Rick's arms. Another mentor gone. Another person who believed in something better, taken before they could see it happen. The attacker fights through the surviving soldiers, taking them down one by one with precision and ferocity that feels familiar. Rick draws his weapon. The attacker approaches. She removes her helmet. Rick removes his. They stare at each other across a distance that's measured in years, not feet. It's Michonne. She found him. After years of searching, following clues across the country, she found him. She found the boots he left at a compound. She found the phones in the boat with pictures of her and Judith. She found an iPhone with a drawing that looked like her and Judith. She found a Japanese man named Benjiro who had a message from Rick carved onto a phone. Every clue led to the next, and she followed them all, across states through danger, nearly dying more than once. She fought through a community of survivors on a charter boat. She survived a massive herd. She lost friends along the way, but she never stopped looking because she knew, somewhere deep in her bones, that Rick was alive. They stare at each other across the wreckage of the helicopter crash. Rick can't believe what he's seeing. Michonne is crying. She runs to him. They embrace. She's holding him so tightly, it looks like she's trying to merge them into one person. "I found you," she keeps saying. "I found you." Rick asks about Judith. Michonne says she's alive. They kiss, and for a moment, the war, the CRM, the dead world, all of it disappears. It's just the two of them, holding each other in the ruins, alive. But there's no time to celebrate because more CRM soldiers are coming. Helicopters overhead, ground forces closing in. Rick tells Michonne she has to go back with the CRM. Give them a false name. Pretend she's a stranger who got caught up in the helicopter crash. Hide everything about who she is and where she comes from. Because if the CRM finds out they have a connection, it's over. For both of them and for everyone back home. Michonne's friend Nat, who helped her get this far, who fought beside her and believed in the mission, is killed by a wounded CRM soldier during the reunion. It's a cruel tax the universe exacts for the beautiful moment that just happened. Michonne barely has time to grieve before she has to slip into character. Michonne enters the Civic Republic as Dana Bethune. She works her way through the consignee program, killing walkers, building credibility, earning the trust of the system. It's an act, of course, but Michonne is smart enough to know she can't rush it. She needs to be inside the system to understand how to break it. But they're being watched. Jadis, the junkyard leader from the old world, the woman Rick traded with, the woman who put him on that helicopter, has reinvented herself as a high-ranking CRM official. She knows exactly who Michonne is. She confronts Rick in private and lays it out with cold precision. If Rick and Michonne try to leave, the CRM will investigate. They'll follow the trail, and that trail leads to Alexandria, to the hilltop, to the kingdom, to Judith and RJ, and everyone Rick has ever loved. Jadis has dossiers on all of them. Names, locations, population estimates. She's not bluffing, she's negotiating. And her terms are simple. Stay, serve the CRM, and the people you love get to keep breathing. Rick and Michonne have a conversation in a crumbling apartment building that I think might be the emotional peak of the entire franchise. The building is literally collapsing around them. Parts of the floor are giving way, dust is falling from the ceiling, and Michonne refuses to leave until they've decided what they're doing. She says, "Nat used to say, you gotta know when to go. It's not time to go. Not until we know where we're going. Michonne asks Rick what the CRM did to him, why he stopped fighting, why he stayed, why the man she fell in love with, the man who would do anything, who crossed continents and bit throats and blew up bridges, why that man gave up. And Rick tells her about Carl. He says, "When I got taken, I fought. I tried to get away by how I would dream. I'd meet up with Carl in my dreams. That's how I survived in here, kept me alive. And then one day, he was just gone. He just left." He pauses and you can see the weight of it crushing him. He tells her that Michonne replaced Carl in his dreams for a while. He fell in love with her in different ways in those dreams, and it kept him going. And then she was gone too. He couldn't see her face anymore, just like he couldn't see Carl's. "I can't live without you," he says. "Without you, I die." He tells her he's figured out how to do that, how to be dead and still keep going, how to exist without actually living. Michonne doesn't accept that, not for a second. She takes his hand, the one that's real, and she tells him that their love is real. Their children are real. The CRM's mission, Rick's sacrifice, his duty, his guilt, none of that is more real than the fact that Judith and RJ are out there somewhere, waiting. She tells him that this back and forth, this cycle of Rick pulling away and then reaching for her, and then pulling away again, it's hurting her. It's making her into someone she doesn't recognize. And she asks Rick plainly to come home. She also admits something she'd been hiding. She lied to Rick earlier when she said Judith was fine. The truth is Judith stopped answering the walkie. Michonne doesn't know if her daughter's okay. She doesn't know if the community's survived. She's been out here for over a year, nearly died from a CRM gas attack, spent months recovering in a mall with Nat, and she has no idea if her children are alive. The CRM took a year from her time with her kids, and she wants to know why Rick is willing to give them any more. The building shakes again. More of the structure gives way. Rick is sitting on the edge of a bed with the personal recovery beacon between them, the device that could call the CRM to extract them, and he's crying. Not quietly, not stoically, he's broken open, and through the tears he tells Michonne that he's sorry, that what he's doing, how he's been, is not how he loves. And she knows that. She knows him better than anyone who has ever lived. Rick meets the CRM's Supreme Commander, Major General Beale. Beale is an older man, a true believer, someone who has spent decades building the CRM into what it is. He reveals the CRM's true plan. They believe that to ensure the Civic Republic's survival as the last real civilization on Earth, they need to thin the global population. Not just walkers, people, living communities. They plan to destroy their own allied settlements and consolidate all remaining resources under CRM control. It's genocide dressed up as pragmatism. Beale presents it calmly, rationally, as if it's just math, sacrificing 10,000 to save 200,000. The numbers work, the morality doesn't. Beale offers Rick a position of leadership. He's impressed by Rick. He's studied Rick's escape attempts, his resilience, his ability to adapt. Beale thinks Rick could be running the CRM within a decade. He even offers to bring Rick's family to the Civic Republic, to keep them safe from the coming storm. It's a genuine offer. Beale isn't trying to trick Rick. He thinks he's offering Rick the best possible deal. But Rick has sat in a room with the governor and listened to similar logic. He has knelt at Negan's feet and been offered a version of survival that required submission. And he has learned over years and years and miles that any system built on the idea that some people are expendable for the greater good is a system that will eventually come for the people you love. It always does. There is no greater good that requires the murder of communities. There is no civilization worth preserving if preserving it means becoming the monster. Rick kills Beale. The specifics are brutal but efficient. Rick has been a killer for a long time now, and when he decides to act, he doesn't hesitate. Rick and Michonne fight to expose the CRM's plans. They have to stop the destruction of the allied communities that Beale set in motion. It's a race against the clock. Thorne, a CRM soldier who had grown close to Rick, who watched him save a little girl during a mission instead of completing his sabotage objective, helps them. Jadis confronts them one final time, wielding the leverage she's accumulated over years of playing both sides, but she's ultimately dealt with. The details of how are complicated and involve a confrontation in the woods and a reckoning that's been building since the junkyard days back in Alexandria. The Civic Republic's civilian government, the CRC, takes control of the military. It's a political revolution enabled by Rick and Michonne exposing what the CRM was planning to do. The authoritarian policies are overturned. Free movement is established. Citizens can leave the Civic Republic if they want to. New people can arrive. The military's mission shifts from secrecy and elimination to outreach and aid. Helicopters that used to carry soldiers and weapons now carry food and medicine to communities they can find. Rick and Michonne fly home in a CRM helicopter. The world below them is green and overgrown, and broken and beautiful. Michonne holds Rick's hand, the real one, the one that's left. They don't say much. What is there to say? They're going home. After everything, after years and years, they're going home. Rick looks at a phone screen showing a portrait of Michonne and Judith, an image that had been passed between survivors for years, as a message of hope, as proof that love survives even when the world doesn't. Judith is sitting on the front steps of a house in Alexandria. She's older now, almost a teenager, long brown hair, her father's blue eyes. She's wearing Rick's old Colt Python on her hip and Michonne's katana strapped across her back. She's been carrying both of them, literally and figuratively, ever since her parents disappeared. She grew up hearing stories about the brave man who blew up a bridge and the warrior woman who went looking for him. It's disbelief, then recognition, then it's disbelief, then recognition, then a joy so overwhelming it looks like it hurts. Then the helicopter lands in a field nearby, kicking up grass and dust, and the doors open. Rick steps out. He's thinner than Judith remembers. His hair is different. He has a prosthetic hand. He looks older, weathered in ways that have nothing to do with age. He stands there at the edge of the field, and he hesitates, just for a second, maybe two, because he's been gone for so long. He missed so much. He missed Judith learning to read. He missed her first time shooting a gun. He missed birthdays and nightmares and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. He missed RJ's entire life. His son has never met him. Rick doesn't know if he has the right to just walk back into their lives after all these years. He doesn't know if they'll want him. He doesn't know if he deserves this. But Judith runs to him. She sprints across that field like she's been waiting to do it for 6 years, which she has, and she throws her arms around him and buries her face in his chest. And she says, "I knew you were still out there. I just never wanted you to feel alone." And Rick, who has cried more times than I can count over the course of this story, cries again. But this time, it's different. This time, it's not grief. He says he thought he was alone. He says he tried so hard to get back, and he couldn't, and he's sorry. And Judith tells him he was never alone. Not really. Michonne joins them. She wraps her arms around both of them, and they stand there in the field, the three of them, holding each other. Then RJ walks up. He's small, maybe 5 or 6, with big dark eyes and a serious expression. He's wearing Rick's old sheriff's hat, the one that travelled through every season, the one Carl wore, the one Judith wore after Carl died. RJ looks up at this stranger and asks, "Are you the brave man?" Because that's what they called him. That's the story Michonne and Judith told. Not that Daddy left, not that Daddy was taken. That Daddy was a brave man who did something incredible to save the people he loved. And someday, if they were lucky, he'd find his way back. Rick crouches down. He touches the brim of the hat on his son's head. The hat that's been through more than any hat should ever have to endure. And he says, "You can call me Dad." RJ nods, serious and satisfied, like this is exactly what he expected. "I knew you would come back," RJ says. He believed it. He always believed it. They hug, all four of them, together for the first time ever. Rick and Michonne and Judith and RJ, a family, whole and complete, standing in a field while CRM helicopters fly overhead carrying